Listen to the songs coming from the streets when all your friends have gone to sleep. It's Qroo keys in your blood tonight, and time to wake everybody up. So turn your stereo louder, paint your eyelids yellow green.
Recently I've come across some interesting discussions regarding the issue of how elderly citizens are treated here in Paraguay, with particular reference to the pension. There are a number of discussion threads online that often emanate from authors that are connected with global financial banking institutions that are making the claim that Paraguay pays a comparatively low amount of pensions per capita than many other countries. And based on that single metric, a number of authors posit that this is proof positive that Paraguay isn't sufficiently fulfilling its responsibilities to its elderly citizens. In one case, they take a country that's in South America and is, in all other regards, a real basket case that nobody would swap places with if were living in Paraguay. But they say because this country pays a higher amount of pensions to its elderly than the pension is paid here in Paraguay, well, that shows that people in that country are treated better. Like anything online, you've always got to dig a bit deeper, particularly when sources are generating these discussions from global institutions. That should be a red flag to anyone to suggest that maybe there's more to things than meet the eye, and I do think that's so in this case. The thought of some sad little Belgian bankster laying in his bed at night unable to sleep because he feels that Paraguayan pensioners aren't getting what they deserve, well, hopefully we can allay his concerns and help him sleep a little bit better. When thinking about this issue, I spoke to some friends of mine around my age, Paraguayans, who have elderly parents, and I asked them the question, how do they feel about the way the elderly are cared for here in Paraguay and how they were managing that themselves with their parents? Well, the response was really interesting because it was almost like a mild look of disgust that I'd even asked the question, because the thought of not looking after your parents in Paraguay is almost unconscionable. If you have elderly parents and you are able to, you look after them. It's not something that you would even question generally. The degree to which that it's actually underscored in the Constitution. The Constitution states that it's a responsibility of the family, society, and then the government to look after the elderly. And it's in that order. It's not the government first, it's the family. Another person I spoke to told me about an elderly man who lived in his neighbourhood and didn't have any sons or daughters that they knew of. So the entire community had just come together, housed him, feed him, clean his clothes, every essential need that that man has. The local community just does it off their own bat. They don't need prompting, or there's no other mechanism in place except the people who live around him feel like it's their collective responsibility. So what's really interesting is, not only is it enshrined in the Constitution, the people really embrace the notion. They're not having to be dragged to the trough to do what they're meant to do. They do it willingly. They look after their elderly if they can. Does it happen every time? Of course not. Are there people who aren't looked after here? Of course there would be. But that's the case in any country. But by and large, what I see here really reinforces what my friends have told me. There's also a plethora of other agencies and also schemes and government initiatives that all work towards helping elderly citizens. So this is a metric that wouldn't show up in a bankster's Excel spreadsheet. The fact that even though not as many pensioners per capita may be getting paid the pension as country B, it doesn't mean that elderly citizens are necessarily being neglected en masse here. Another factor that I think contributes to the fact that many Paraguayans are able to live dignified years in their retirement is that when they stop working, when they get to that age where they're no longer doing whatever they were doing for their entire lives, they're able to quite easily supplement their income. In any street you walk along in this town and just about anywhere else in Paraguay, you'll see outside of almost every second house, there's some sort of little enterprise going on. In our street, out of the half a dozen houses in our small block, there's 2 businesses that are being operated from those houses. I doubt there's any permits or permissions from the local government that have been obtained. It's just people who have decided that they want to make a bit more money. In one case, someone sells some herbs for terrarium. The other one has a small spa. But wherever you go, within a few hundred meters, there's a small tienda. There's someone doing something, making empanadas. So a lot of these businesses are run by elderly people, people who are retired or semi-retired, decided that they just want to make a little bit more money. So they don't have Mr. Clipboard from the local municipality on their doorstep demanding his cut or saying why they can't do what they're doing. And although it might be just a modest amount that they're making, it's enough to make them comfortable. They may be selling toilet paper and butter, and they may have just got it at a marginally better price than what you can get it at the supermarket, and then they're just pocketing the difference when the local community buys off them. And there's no doubt about it that the people who live in their immediate vicinity go and buy their toilet paper and their empanadas from Mrs. Gomez, because they know that that's part of her strategy for getting by in her elder years, and so the community gets the opportunity to support her, and it's a really wonderful thing. And nobody's dying of salmonella, or there aren't so many cars in the street that nobody can park, and all of the other baseless claims that so many of our governments right around the world make as to why people can't do that. It doesn't actually really happen in the real world for the most part. People get by, and it's really a feature of living in a place like Paraguay that you do have Mrs. Valdez down there who's making her donuts or whatever it is. There are so many little operations that are meaningfully contributing to the welfare of the people that are engaged in those operations. Even if you go down to the supermarket, you will invariably see an elderly chap or lady helping the people who are parking to back up safely. So you will always sling them a few guarani, and that's enough in totality at the end of the day for them to live a really dignified life. They're out in society, they're playing their part, they're happy, they're engaged, they're fit, they're mobile. Who loses? Nobody. Because this is society self-assembling and being allowed to do what societies do, and that is that when they can think openly and they can be relatively free in terms of the way that they go about their business, people can invariably find their way through. So too can senior citizens. So the ability to be able to do things freely here in Paraguay is a game changer in the way that the country is able to care for its elderly and allow its elderly to play its part at the same time. Everybody wins. They don't have a retirement industrial complex that's just waiting to put them in a small box and scoop up their estate, either for the company or for the family or both. There's not the same sort of pressure that older people feel here to have to, come on, Nan, get into the old age home. We need that space either for the high rise that the son-in-law's got planned or whatever the variation is. So when you are in your elder years, you don't have to be thinking to yourself, who wants the house? How am I going to hold on to it? How am I going to pay the property tax? How am I going to pay this and that? Elderly people seem to stay in their houses far longer into their old age than it appears so in many other places. If necessary, family move in, you see elder nieces and nephews, or the next generation somehow steps up. Somehow the job gets done. The house is retained in the family. Old age in Paraguay is not regarded as an illness or a disability. Society seems to embrace it and manage it in a way that I think many other countries could take some lessons from. So I hope that's provided a bit of a counter view to what's out there in the mainstream about how Paraguay is dealing with its pensioners. Yes, there is a relatively low amount of pensions being paid here, but there are so many other ways that the country fills the gaps in ways that really, I think, bring a lot of credit to the country. There aren't ridiculous taxes that people are having to keep up with, all in the name of having to care for the elderly, because we've seen how that rolls out in so many other countries. Rather than the services being provided, somehow the taxes just get gobbled up, and lo and behold, they just come for more and more. Here in Paraguay, there's a model where the government really takes a relatively minor role. Yes, they do pay pensions, yes, they do provide services, but the lion's share of the lifting is done by the society, and that is an entirely sustainable model. And those banksters in Belgium and beyond who are so concerned about the degree to which people are being looked after here, I think there's some other countries that perhaps could do with your concern and influence, because even though on your Excel spreadsheet it may say that there are other places that are looking after their pensioners better, sometimes you need to look a little bit deeper. And I think that the agendas that are driving the discussion are more about possibly banksters with big checkbooks looking to bring Paraguay down a path that too many other countries have gone down. Thankfully, Paraguay seems to have woken up to that little trick. As always, that's just my opinion. I think there's more to it than meets the eye. So until next time, take care. Ciao.
And time to wake everybody up. So turn your stereo up.